Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Jason Flame and host of the Master Motivation Podcast. Welcome to this edition of Master Motivation with Mr. Joey Perry on today, this Tuesday, July 11th. Let me introduce my guest again. This is Joey Perry from Jonesboro, Arkansas, with two kiddos, Ella, 19,
Right.
and Bruce, 15. Joey began martial arts in 1985 at age 8 and opened his first school in 1995 at the age of 17. He then sold his studio in 2021 after operating for 27 years. He's also now the owner of the Comic Ninja collectible shop. Mr. Perry is currently the vice president of Professional Martial Arts Conference, which is the premier regional and national open sport karate league. He's also the director of officials for PROMAC, and Joey now travels with PROMAC events monthly and helps teach private lessons at Resolute Martial Arts in Destin, Florida, in between. Welcome to the show, Joey.
Hey man, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing. You're busy, a lot of great shows with a lot of great people. So I'm honored that you asked me to be on. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have been very blessed, very honored, very fortunate to have met so many amazing people in this great world of ours, the martial arts industry, right? It could be, it's funny because I'm a pro wrestler as well, right? So I always
Right.
kind of look at the wacky world of professional wrestling and the wacky world of martial arts. But there's a lot of people out there doing some great things. I love your spirit and your energy. And I just can't wait to share your story with everybody here watching. So if you are watching here live today, please shoot us a quick comment. Let us know that you're out there. And let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you have any questions throughout the interview today. So I'm looking forward to this next hour with Mr. Perry. And the first thing that I love to get started with, Joey, is you and I have a little bit in common. We started martial arts around the same time. As a matter of fact, I started in 1985 as well. I opened my school or started my school in 94. I think I'm maybe just a couple of years. So we're in that same era of time of starting martial arts and then opening up our martial arts school. I was 19, you were 17. Man, crazy that we were that young to open our business, right? But before we talk about that,
interesting parallel.
Yeah, totally. Before we talk about opening the school, getting involved in martial arts, man, just tell me about your growing up, your family, your background.
Well, as you mentioned, from Arkansas, I was actually born right outside of Chicago, Illinois, and the first 5 years of my life lived there in St. Charles, so a little suburb of Chicago. So I have a lot of love for Chicagoland, an area, and I still have family up there. But my dad was from Arkansas, and they at that time in the 70s, they were trying to get out of Chicago, come back or come down this way, so to speak, to the Arkansas area. They wanted to raise the kids here, all of those things. They didn't want to do it up north. So that was, the kind of my first 5 years being in the north, and then immediately thrust into the south, and been basically all over the place, traveling with martial arts since then, thankfully. But raised in Arkansas, Jonesboro, which is in the northeast part of Arkansas, really actually closer to Memphis than it is Little Rock. So it's a nice little area, around 100,000 people in the overlapping communities and county area. So it's not too large, but everything's spread out, a lot of land here, a lot of farming, that type of thing. Went to high school, school here, my whole life through. Went to college for a few years before I decided I was going to just do full-time martial arts. I was already operating this school right out of high school, and wanted to get the degree, wanted to be the first one in my family to do that. But after first few years in college, I could have toughed it out. I could have went ahead and gotten that degree, but it was just martial arts full time was pulling at me, and my parents said to go for it. So that was the right, getting to that point, being raised in Arkansas was super easy. It was super fun, days in the country, riding the four-wheeler, running around the neighborhood. There wasn't quite as many worries in the 80s. At least we think there wasn't, not in my area anyway. So it was great. It was easy going. My parents were great. So I was, I mentioned I was adopted right at birth, and always raised with kind of a good loving spirit, good loving home. And this area was really, really a lot of fun to grow up in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of things you said there that I want to touch on. Just the last thing though, being adopted. You were adopted at birth. Did that ever affect your identity, or did that ever affect, how you felt, relationship with your parents? I mean, obviously at birth, you didn't know any different, right? But did that raise any challenges in your life?
No, it was really, I don't remember. I don't remember not knowing. My
Mm.
parents raised me, always telling me, making it, a really nice story, beautiful story, the whole thing. So I always knew, it wasn't a surprise or anything negative. It was always a positive. So really my whole life I was able to share that and talk about that with other kids or people. And, it took a few years, but as I got older, I understood that it's not always a fairy tale story. It's not always a great thing, or people don't always know, and all of the things, and there's all these different reasons. But, I don't know. I feel like I got really lucky with what wound up happening and me being adopted at birth. I mean, immediately I never knew any different, and
Hmm.
I had a birth defect. They didn't care. There's a whole process to that when you're being adopted, I guess, depending on what state you're in, and then on top of that, having to have surgery and stuff. But my parents were great. They were simple truck driver, factory worker people. Loved me from the get. I don't know. They might regret that now, but little joke. But it was great, and it was never anything that was that held me back in any way. So I got really, really lucky in that way, I guess. But it's all
No.
about attitude and what's around you. So
Hmm.
going back to being raised where I was, when I was, by who I was, that made all the difference.
For sure. Now, did you have siblings? Did you grow up
Yeah.
an only child? You had siblings.
Yeah, I did. Part of the reason I was adopted, their reason is they didn't think they could have children. They were married for, I believe, almost 10 years, and then they adopted me, and then 5 years later, my mom got pregnant, out of the blue, and then she was the only other child they ever had. So it was her and I. But along the way, my parents were, again, just very I don't know, just loving, accepting, unique people. Took in different cousins of mine that needed help, and a couple people lived with us over the years that they would try to help with their kids, or give them structure and that kind of thing. So, Amy was, my sister with them, but I had many cousins and many people along the way that would be like that.
Hmm,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
And you said growing up in Arkansas, farmland. Your
Hmm.
parents were trucker, right? What,
Yeah.
what was that? What was that lifestyle like? Was anything out of the ordinary, or anything that really impacted you?
No, there's nothing. I really feel like I had one of those really great 80, like, really being born in 77. I feel like I was raised in the 80s. I
Hmm.
was very much an 80s child because, 3 to 10 or 3 to 12 years old through the 80s. So it was great. I mean, becoming a Michael Jordan, the ending in Magic and Bird, and big basketball fan, obviously the dream team, but, and then all the video games and everything. I mean, the 80s were so great. And my parents were supportive of, being, having the kid. And even, I was their first one. They didn't have kids for so long. So I think they did their best to dote on me the best they could. Even though they were simple people, didn't have a lot. Again, factory worker, truck driver in the South, very simple, lower middle class, maybe, as far as, upbringing, surroundings, but I never wanted for anything. So, I don't know. I think that what they provided was the perfect mix of what I needed, and a little bit of cool stuff. They
Hmm.
could get some toys, some this, some that, but also a lot of freedom of love, and just activity. And at the time, I was in the perfect spot for that. So it was a lot of fun. And growing up in the 80s was great. And all of my love for the comic book industry came from that. So I'm sure we'll get into that too.
For sure, absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I, growing up in the '80s myself, right? I was born in '74, so again, couple years older.
Yeah.
But man, dude, the '80s, like, still to this day, the
Great.
'80s is
God.
the best decade to me. Like, my friends, my students, they make fun of me sometimes because the music I still listen to is like, if the '80s come on, like the '80s just stay on. And so
It's a
for
great
us
era.
too, the 80s, I mean, that was the Karate Kid era,
Yep.
right? This was before
Yep.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was after the Bruce Lee era. And for a lot of us, you know, the Karate Kid had a really big impact on us getting involved in martial arts. How did you get
Wow.
involved in martial arts?
That's it. You nailed it. I mean, you nailed it. I mean, it just from the era, that was a good guess, right? When you think about the timing of it. So, you know, Karate Kid came out, and I had not started yet. Of course, you know, again, in Arkansas, there wasn't a wealth of martial art opportunities where I was either. You know, it's definitely not, you know, it's not even there now, but way more so now. But grew up prior to that getting to watch Chuck Norris movies with my dad. You know, my dad made sure I watched Chuck Norris movies and all of the mix, and, you know, good or bad, I loved it. I loved the martial arts. I loved the karate. I thought he was, you know, amazing. Chuck Norris has been my hero forever. And, you know, I was like, you know, that stuff is awesome. I'd love to do that one day. Karate Kid came out, watched all the trailers, but for whatever reason, I don't remember why I didn't get to go to the theater and see it. I remember being really disappointed, but shortly after it came out on cassette and VHS, you know, the beta wars, right? And my aunt had a big machine and had the TV this summer. We went there for a visit, and we went to the rental store, and it had just come out to be able to rent. We rented it, and I probably watched it 10 times over the weekend. Like, I fell in love with it. And I just begged. I was like, when we go back, you know, home, we've got to find it. I've got to do it. And the next month or so, I think school started, and my girlfriend, my little third grade girlfriend, was doing gymnastics and talked about a karate guy coming there, you know, doing a class. She's like, you're always talking about karate and whatever, like, go do class. So we went and checked it out. And at the time, again, it was, you know, I was 8 years old. Freshly 8 years old, just turned 8, and was little. Over that summer, my parents let me do like a community violin and music thing, you know, and just to get me doing something else with a little bit of something that was different, not running around outside barefoot in Arkansas or on the, you know, bike or whatever, but you know, did the violin, and I think it was maybe $20 a month, you know, to do these little lessons once a week over, you know, at a private home or something. It was way out of our league. I don't even know why or how we were doing it. It made no sense to me now looking back, but was doing that, and I kind of enjoyed it. I thought that was nice and neat. But then when the karate opportunity came, we went and tried a lesson, and it was going to be $25 a month to go, you know, twice a week to this class. And it was a big deal. Like, I remember a big dinner conversation about it. And, you know, I was wanting to do that, but I didn't want to give up playing the violin because I didn't understand the difference, that I wasn't going to grow up and be Charlie Daniels. He didn't play the violin, he plays the fiddle. It's an entirely different thing, But, you know, it was one of those little kid things, and it was funny. But I remember, you know, like, not wanting to give that up, but being so excited to try to be Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee, and, you know, do the karate, and thinking that was cool. So gave it up, and might have been the best $25 a month my parents ever spent. I'm not sure. They might argue, but they might agree.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I got launched into it anyway. It was at the local gymnastics center, and twice a week program. It was a Taekwondo program through a guy named Jack Bell. So shout out to Master Jack Bell. Back in the day, he was actually going to the Arkansas State University here in Jonesboro, and he was going here. I guess he was in his graduate year, and had been a part of a regional Taekwondo organization for years, and was, you know, a black belt, whatever. And was going to teach the program, so he started it, and that's what it was. And man, I took to him right away. I wouldn't leave him alone. Was so excited to run in there and jump around and, you know, kick and punch. And there was a lot of older people there at the time. There still wasn't as many kids. And if you grew up and you started martial arts in the, you know, early 80s or late 70s, that you know that there still wasn't a lot of little kids yet, you know. But the Turtles and Karate Kid boom, you know, I mean, obviously that changed everything, you know, and I was right in the middle of that, and cause and effect, I guess, really. But it hadn't hit here. I mean, so there was a few kids, but man, he was really nice to me and let me come and do a few little school talks that he did over the next month or two. I didn't know much, but I got to wear my uniform and go be the helper and, you know, listen and doing a demonstration, doing a demo with him, you know, a school talk, but I didn't know it, and he didn't say that then, and he
Right.
probably didn't know it was, he wasn't really trying to be like we are now. He was just doing something. But man, I fell in love with it instantly, and thankfully Jack Bell was who he was, and helped me, to get launched. I really only he was only with me, I guess, through that school year. I guess he graduated in May from the university, and then one of his people underneath him that also had moved to town that was also part of that network. It was just circumstance.
Hmm.
It just happened to be that. So he continued the program when Mr. Bell left, and had that for quite a few years there. Got my black belt under him, a guy named Billy Madison. But that was my launching into martial arts, and how I got started, and never looked back, really.
Billy Madison, and not the Adam
Yeah.
Sandler Billy Madison.
I
Well,
was waiting for you to pick that one up. Yeah,
right, you
he's
got
heard
to.
it his whole life. He's a great guy. He retired from the martial arts and lives in northern Arkansas, teaching high school now. I get to run into him every now and then, see him on social media. But he was my instructor for quite a few years there, maybe 2.5 years there. And he had moved into a commercial location. He had a little bit of aspirations for that at the time, he thought, so made it a commercial studio. And that was a lot of fun because it grew a little bit more, and it was clean, and it was in a building, and it was a thing. We went
Hmm.
from working out at the gymnastics center to a National Guard armory. If and if you wrestle local, all about National Guard armories and whatnot. I mean, so
Yep.
we were there on dirty floors doing that for a couple of years, and then he went commercial, and got a studio location, and we had carpet on the floor to train on, and that was we really thought we were big time. We were ready to move to California. We had carpet on our floor to train.
Well,
Yeah, it was big.
it's funny. I started at a rec center, at a community center, and carpet on the floor. We got mats later on, but you talked about Chuck Norris. My
Yeah,
instructor's lineage traces directly back. My instructor taught for Chuck Norris in the early to mid '70s at the Sherman Oaks Karate School here in California. And he
sure.
also trained with Pat Johnson, who was the stunt choreographer
Yeah,
on the Karate Kid and the Ninja Turtles. So, it's kind of always been cool to have that lineage directly through those
yes, sir.
people. I met them both a handful of times and heard lots of great stories about them and about our lineage. Tell me more about, these instructors, right? Mr.
Sure.
Bell, Mr. Madison, what was their lineage and what was the organization that they were a part of?
It was the connections were really cool, and then even after them for quite a long period of time, it was really neat having kind of I say a traditional Taekwondo beginning, just because of the kind of people they were and the kind of kid that I was. Now as being a long time martial artist instructor, that was a good fit for me. It was a good fit for who I was, as a kiddo. So I got lucky in that regard. I didn't get taken to a karate school where it was not the right atmosphere, and I quit.
Hmm.
I mean, so I'm really thankful for that experience, especially those first 8-9 years training, and how I was treated and who I was around, and the type of energy it was, and kind of the size it was, because really, with those guys, they came from their roots actually go all the way back to the beginning of the guys that began ATA. Because being from Arkansas,
Hmm.
a lot of them came from Central Arkansas. So when the ATA kicked off, I was never an ATA student or member, because they had already moved on and started the other organization by the time I came along, and had actually twice fold. Um, but their lineage and their history is back from that group of people whenever they launched that. So your Bill Clarks and, your Jim Wolfs and that whole group that wound up launching ATA, and all the way back, I guess. I mean, really, the Little Rock headquarters, a lot of them worked there, through the '70s, and then by the time '80s came, I think they wound up splitting off, and I think that was a period of time when the ATA lost a lot of high ranked people at a certain level, and there was different Taekwondo groups that started, and that mix came from that. So I stayed with that organization through the time I was around 19, 20 years old, 21, something like that. And then the organization was the NTFA, the National Taekwondo Federation. It was just another. Now looking back, it was just another small regional Taekwondo group with a lot of really great people, and a lot of really great martial artists in it in different pockets, and a great group. But it eventually kind of fell apart. As I got older in the last few years, I was part of trying to help it stay together, or trying to help it run events, so my first experience running tournaments was with that organization, and which is now my, one of my full-time, things that I do. So I'm very thankful for those opportunities, because the size that the NTFA was then, a lot of good people, and the size that it was really helped me build confidence with how to run events and how to run tournaments and how to take care of customers and, how to follow schedules when it came to that type of thing. Because by the time I started doing that for that organization, I was also launching my studio. I was taking over a studio 40 miles from me, which is how I started to own my own at that time. So all of that happened, between the ages of 17 and 20, and I was doing those things. And then eventually, as far as instructor lineage and kind of how that moved, and we can always come back to anything there. But after that, we kind of launched our own group. There was a lot of people that wanted to stay together. A lot of people were looking towards me for leadership, even though I was really young. I was already, like I said, doing a lot of leadership things within that, helping it on different levels, really by proxy for some of it, but as it fell apart, a lot of people looked for me to continue something. So we did some things as a network, a group. We launched a little group called Elite. It was real simple, and we just helped the studio owners with managing their students and running testings, and a few of them with ranked promotions, but it really wasn't intended to be about that. We weren't trying to do that type of thing. We just wanted to help everybody and help the schools and give them opportunities to do a tournament and things like that. So that worked really well for the next couple of years and kept me busy. And the studio was skyrocketing, and I ran full time with having multiple studios by then. I was young but full of ambition and a lot of great people, that I brought up. And again, we could come back to any of those things. But around that time is when I found Quanjin Ernie Reyes. Of course, I grew up knowing Ernie Reyes. I grew up knowing Ernie Jr. and idolizing them as some of my heroes, through the movies and shows. So I had a short list of who I wanted to reach. And I know that, we may talk about mentors and that type of thing, but with the line of lineage and instructors, Grandmaster Reyes became my instructor at that point and has been my mentor, my instructor since that point. And he's an alien. I don't know that there's anybody like him. He's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to go back for just a second. Talking about martial arts, you started when you were 8 years old. What kept your interest in martial arts? What kept you tied to it? And did you have times where you stopped and took a break, or did you just keep going straight through from 8 to 17?
Now,
and what were some of your struggles during that time?
I know like everybody, everybody's journey is different, right? Every one of us, and people have different physical things or things happen in your life or your kids, or you go to college, or, who you can train with. I think maybe, because I started my studio so young, I was able to graduate high school, then the very next month bought the studio out, and then I launched an entirely different thing and, in a way of being involved with it at that point. So no, I never got burned out, even up to that point as a kid. You're talking, going from 8 years old up to 17. That's the time when most kids, they'll burn out at some point at their teenage years, or they get tired of it, or the girlfriend or the boyfriend, or, whatever sports offer a scholarship that the parents need them to go get. Right. I mean, there's a million different reasons that kids or teenagers quit. But for me, it just became my thing. Like I loved everything else that I loved. I loved hanging out with my buddies. I loved going out riding the four-wheeler. I loved playing basketball, even though I'm horrible at basketball. I'm not great at it at all. I just love to play, and I was always fast, whatever. But anyway, but I love to play, so I love doing those things. But I never felt like I could give martial arts up once I started it. I never felt like I wanted to quit. Even to this day, being older, I'm not teaching every day, of my life. I don't have my studio, although, we can talk, later about, I am helping, I am teaching still. But I think it's a good rhythm for me where I am at the moment, because even through now, I never once said, I don't like this anymore. I don't want to do it, or I need a break.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just the pace and who I was. And then now as I've gotten older, there's certain things I don't want to do every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go spar every day. I don't want to go work on my tricks every day. I don't want to, I don't even want to kick, punch, work out, or run a mile every day. You know what I mean? Like, at this point, but I love martial arts, and I never want to quit or give it up. So I've been very lucky with that I haven't hit a burnout or hit a wall or had any reasons where I had to quit. I've had to slow down a little bit here and there. I broke my neck at one point in 2009. That was a crazy year. So I had to slow down, but I still kept going. But yeah, no, I've gotten lucky with that. Even as a kid, I never did reach burnout. I think maybe because I had everybody else in my life thought it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a lot of support. I think that's probably something that really helped that. I didn't have another thing pulling at me that was really, really hard. That helped. And
Right.
then I had everybody in my life just thought it was cool. My
Mm-hmm.
aunts, my uncles, my mom, my dad, my buddies. Everybody was like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, he does karate. He's with Chuck Norris, or yeah, you go break your boards, or he's going to go do whatever." And it was a positive thing. So,
Yeah.
power
Well,
of positivity, right?
looking at kids now, it's so easy for them to be pulled in so many different directions with different activities because,
Yeah.
every parent wants their child to be well-rounded. That's the thing they hear. They want them to be well-rounded. They want them to try everything. The only challenge that I see with that is like for yourself, right? I mean, look what happened. You stuck with martial arts because you didn't have these things pulling at you, and you're very successful at it. You still have a passion for it, right? And I think sometimes that's where kids lose their passion for different things because they're always bouncing from one thing to the next. They never really get super good at one thing. They're just kind of good at a lot of different things for the
Right.
sake of being well-rounded. Now, I'm all for, kids playing sports. My kids, my daughter dance, my son played baseball, football, soccer, wrestling. Both of them did martial arts as well. I want them to be well-rounded in the way that they can do other things, but martial arts has always been the one thing for our family, really in general, that because of what I do for a living, because of my passion for martial arts, that's kind of always kept us on the path. But martial arts also
Yeah, that's
helps you
good.
get really good at the other things. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you're not as good as you think you are at basketball, but I'm sure that you're better than average because you have the martial arts mentality, the martial arts attitude. You have that discipline, you have that drive, you have that work ethic. There's so many things that come out of martial arts. But I think that that's
Right.
the one thing is that kids are getting pulled in so many directions. And you even
Right.
brought it up earlier about looking for the scholarship, maybe because
Yeah.
that might help a family, the boyfriends and girlfriends. I mean, all that stuff. But I can't gloss over this. You said you broke your neck in 2000. Was it 2009?
2009. Yes.
2009.
Yeah.
What the heck happened? Did that happen in
Yeah.
martial arts?
No.
Okay.
No. It happened playing on the playground with my kids.
Whoa.
Actually. Yeah. It's one of those. I still get. I get emotional talking about that. I don't talk about that enough, or I don't say enough, but I mean, but it's been so long, I don't just go around bringing it up, but
Mm-hmm.
everybody in my life at the time when it happened, they knew. And then for years it was a thing. Right. And then now a lot of people don't even know that it happened. I got very lucky, number one, that it wasn't, there was certain millimeters away from damaging the spinal cord, which would have permanently paralyzed me. Everything would be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, you would think. I come from when I was young, which in my competition days of martial arts, which that's a whole chunk of stuff to talk about. But I mean, I competed. I was a big NASCA kid. Was on Jun Chung's team. Was flipping, flying. All of those great things. Never once had a serious injury during, the learning of those things, which even back then, the way that I learned them was archaic compared to how we teach tricking and stuff now. I mean, gosh, as I said, that's a different conversation, but none of that. And then, getting into MMA and grappling in my 20s, and then bringing it part of curriculum, and then being involved with people too. Alan Belcher, UFC fighter, is one of my black belts. I don't even think I mentioned that. So during that era, and then since then, getting into all of those things, never had a major thing, little this, little that, little whatever. But yeah, no, I was, my kids were 2, or maybe Bruce, my son, was not even 2 yet. He was kind of chucking along as a little chunky, little one that could just kind of barely walk. And Ella, my daughter, I think was maybe 5.5, 6, and we were on the school playground just right around the corner from their mom's house. And at the time, their mom and I had just separated, that year, a few months earlier. She was living in that area. There's a great playground in that area. I just went to pick the kids up, and we were, out on the playground. We were by ourselves. It was, it was a fall day. Great. It was a little bit before Thanksgiving, but we're having a great time. No worries. Everything's all great. But my daughter climbs up on a platform, a next level of a big metal, think about a school playground contraption, where they got multiple slides and poles and bridges, and it's all working together, and there's 2 or 3 levels, and there's metal. That's all it was. She climbed up to the next level, and my son wanted to slide down the slide that was, maybe 3 feet off the ground, and it was large. And, I kind of helped push him down where he could slide on his back and ease down, and he did. And I'm feeling all good about it. Like, oh, great job, buddy. That's a big deal for a little guy, and I'm like, oh, that was cute. And I turned and look, and my daughter's right on the platform. She's like, Dad, come up here and go down. And I said, okay. And I just jumped. I just, again, I was full of, just me being me. And, so me doing a jump up onto a platform that was 3 feet higher than me, no big deal. My daughter was a few feet back. I mean, nothing I hadn't done 20 times, right? In those moments, right? So in and of itself, it was no big deal, but I just jumped up. And when I obviously went for it. I, went ahead and jumped, from being a little fun, like I was Superman, and I didn't notice the metal beam that was about 8 inches over my head that went from end to end, that was bolted in. So as I jumped with all of my might to explode up onto the platform, I basically just car crashed my head into the metal beam, which, I didn't know it, because I, instantly was out. I woke up, I had fallen down onto the ground. Bruce, my son, my little guy, was looking at me. Ella had made her way, my daughter had made her way down and was looking at me and asking me if I was okay to wake up. So I guess I been out for a few seconds. Luckily, nothing was necessarily bleeding or broken that I could see. I don't know how, but it wasn't. But that was the first thing. But then I very quickly noticed I tried to get up. I looked around a little bit. I asked Ella if they were okay. It took me maybe 10 seconds or so, kind of looking at them, letting them know I was okay. And then I went ahead and started to get up. I don't know, like, I didn't feel, it took me a minute. You know what I said? It took me a few seconds asking them if they were okay, looking around. I didn't move. I didn't even try to move. I remember just looking at them. And then when I did try to move, I went to get up, and this was no problem, but then I couldn't move my left arm. And then I realized I couldn't move my left leg, and everything was tingling. So essentially the left side of my body was all completely numb, and I had no feeling in it. I couldn't use it. And I just kind of looked around, noticed I wasn't, there were no bones sticking out, because I thought, well, maybe I broke a few things and I can't feel it, and I kind of looked, and I couldn't tell, but I thought maybe that was, I just had that happen. Not nothing with that, but I should have been smart enough to just use my phone or their mother around the corner. Instead, I made my way up, grabbing apparatus, and I had Ella's little brother back to the truck, kind of bounced one side in. I had my hand in my right. Now when I explain it, but I could in on the corner from their mom, so I drove them back and went in and then laid in the floor and laid there for about an hour, and she kind of, tended to me, made sure I was okay. And then I kind of got tingling, but I got feeling back on my left side. And I thought, well, maybe I just hit a nerve, whatever, hit my head, knocked myself out. I'll be okay. And enough people that day yelled at me about it, because I was like, well, this is what happened. And everybody kept telling me to go to the emergency room, go to the doctor. So I called, and immediately got an MRI. I got all these tests done because she, made me come in and was going to check me out. And the next morning I got a call asking me to come in for basically emergency surgery. I damaged my I think a C4 or 5, and like two or three complaints. Now I can't even remember exactly what all it was. I guess I try to throw it away, right? But
Right.
I got replacement. People that have had stuff happen, they know like sometimes you get fusion, different stuff that helps you. But with my age, with what I do, that I was able to get a replacement, some replacement parts, not necessarily fusion, and it helped me to maintain mobility and all of that. And it was about a year of recovery, like to be able to get like full permission to like go back to being regular Joey. Just ask me not to let anybody yank on my neck too much anymore, try not to land on it anymore. So
right.
there
Wow.
was that.
So listen, when this happened, do you remember what was going on in your head? Like, holy crap, like my kids are here and I'm broken, I'm hurting. Or once you found out that your neck was in fact broken, did things start going through your mind about, how is this going to affect my life? Or as a martial artist where you're like, I'm going to shake this one off and I'm just going to keep on going?
Yeah, no, I mean, in the moment, laying on the ground, my only concern was, are my kids okay?
Right.
Are they going to be okay? Can I get them back to their mom? And let's find out what I need. Right or wrong, that was my thought process, and I should have had somebody come pick us up, but that was it. But then as I find that out and I find out, oh, I do have to have surgery tomorrow, like this is a big deal. All I could do is trust the doctor. I'm not a big fan of doctor. I'm a huge fan of doctors. I'm not a fan of getting surgery or or having being in the hospital. Correct that. Thank goodness we have medical people. But I'm such a weenie on that. My kryptonite. But I knew obviously I had to do that. I had to go through that. I had no time to do anything else. So like the next morning I was going. Like it was the deal. And then the doctor was really great. And he showed me everything, as much as I wanted to know. And, then he just assured me that, unless something was, whatever the percentage of chances with anything are, that it would be fine if I followed it, that I would recover. And again, at my age, because I was starting to get a little older then, this was, a little bit older, not to be doing stupid stuff, but I would be okay. So, I mean, I just took that, and in my head, even if he was less optimistic, even if I had to get fusion, even if I could never backflip again, or even if I could never, 540 kick again, or whatever, I was alive. I felt great. I wasn't paralyzed, and I think it was millimeters away from paralyzing me permanently. So I was just thankful, I guess, for that. So I never thought that it could be anything other than, no, I'm going to have this. I'm going to heal up, and we're going to keep rocking on. And I had a great staff of people working at the studios at that time, and at a gym at the time as well. Everybody was super supportive. I mean, it was, it was already a weird time in my life. Then I was, again, I was divorcing, that year, and had a bad business venture with the gym that I mentioned also. So all that happened in the same year, but I stayed positive, and I knew I was going to get through it. There's no big deal. Right.
Isn't it amazing as martial artists that the injuries sometimes we, an injury that takes place for you completely, you've done all these things, backflips, MMA, grappling, sparring, and it happens on jumping up onto a playground, piece of playground equipment. I never had, knock on wood, never had any major injuries in martial arts. The only major injuries I had was, doing my fun hobby, which was professional wrestling. I dislocated my shoulder, got a concussion. None of those things ever happened in full contact martial arts practice, but it happens elsewhere. And I don't know if it was because it was a careless decision or I don't know, but it's just interesting how that all plays out. Now, when after the surgery and the time off to recover and all that stuff, how did that affect your morale? Because you're used to going and training, you're used to going and fighting, you're used to doing all this stuff. How did that affect you when you just couldn't at that time? Was that depressing at all for you?
No, I didn't let it be. Honestly, like at that moment in time, I wasn't competing anymore personally. You know, I guess I could still occasionally, but I was running tournaments, running circuit, running my studios. I had my kids. I had a lot of really great positive things going on, and none of them really. I didn't have to be an elite athlete anymore in order to do all those great things. It was just all about other parts, and even with that, I guess, you know, I still could have felt bad. I still could have gotten depressed. I still could have felt that because I couldn't physically go, you know.
Right.
But and I'm, you know, just as egotistical as the next martial arts person, you know. But I've never been one that feels like I'm really competitive, but I don't feel like I have to beat you. If we're gonna compete, I want to beat you. And I'm going to try my best to beat you, or I'm going to try to be the best kicker in the room. I'm going to try to be the best martial artist in the room. Or I'm going to try to win the U.S. Open Forms Championship. If I'm trained to do it, it's not going to ruin my life. I'm not going to mess up all the other 100 great things I've got going on. You know what I mean? So physically, maybe if I had this wheelchair bound, any there's levels to that, obviously. You know, I still have to believe that attitude wouldn't be any different. I'm still so lucky for everything else I've got and everything I'm able to do and be alive. And at the time, that was just more important. Everything else was way more important than whether or not I could go like 23-year-old Joey went. You know what I mean? It just didn't bother me. Still doesn't.
Listen, guys, if you're watching live, and Joey, I don't know if you hear this at all, but there's a little bit of clicking in and out on our audio. I'm not sure if it's coming on my end or on your side, but I apologize for that, guys. Hopefully everything stays good and strong throughout the rest. I want to talk more about, you know, your competition days, you're opening your school. You started your school at 17 years old. So obviously didn't have a lot of business experience at that time, I'm assuming.
Zero.
Kind of like hope and a prayer, right? I mean, because I remember being 19 and I loved martial arts. I loved teaching martial arts. I loved training every day. I loved being on the mat, but I didn't know a damn thing about, you know, any business whatsoever. And fortunately, for the first 10 years of being in business, I mean, I kind of got by. It kind of just worked. And it was when my daughter was born, and, you know, a couple years later, my son was born, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. And that's when I got involved with Maya to help me learn how to run my business. What were some of the biggest struggles you had when you opened your schools and some of the biggest mistakes that you made?
Man, an absolute ton of struggles when I first opened my studio. I mean, and again, just, you know, anything negative, you know, all of my failures, and I've got a ton of them. Some of them cost me way more than others. I still have always had the mindset, like, I'm going to be okay, or I'm just going to pivot and do something, or I'm going to make it happen. So none of it ever really got me into any bad positions or bad moments or bad places. It's just always about moving forward and just moving forward and stay positive. So early on, I didn't know any better. Like you mentioned, we didn't know what we didn't know. You know, you don't know, oh, that's bad, or, oh, I'm not going to have, you know, it just depends on your background. And, you know, at 17, I had been a part of all those versions of a class, right? You know, starting off in the gymnastics studio, and then moving to National Guard Armory, and then there being a time where we worked out at a dance studio, and then in the hallway of a dance studio, and then in the bathroom that was cleaned out at one. I mean, like all versions of places. So when I got to, you know, was 17 and was able to take over, kind of buy out the studio, I had to go get a loan, got my dad to sign on the loan for me for $5,000 to buy out a studio that had 7 active students in a town of 8,000 people, 40 miles away from where I lived. And we bought a studio for $5,000 that paid for some of the equipment that was in there, the carpet on the floor, those 7 students that were bringing in $170 total a month between the 7 of them. I think it was $35 a month or $38.50 at the time to train. And there was a heavy bag and some other stuff, right? I bought the business. Rent was $250 a month. Overhead was probably another $200 altogether. And then my gas money to drive 40 miles one way 3 times a week. So my initial struggles with launching, I didn't have to go out and go find a building or whatever, because I got the call from the associate I knew that was part of our network at that time, that she wanted to retire and wanted me to buy out the school. So all of that was in place. I wasn't smart enough to know, why would I move from an area of 100,000 people and go buy a school in a town of 8,000, 40 miles away, that has a really low income, all the things, right? All the reasons not to go do a commercial business, that's like what we have. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a bad idea, but I did know that I wanted to own my own studio. I wanted to launch. I knew I could do great things. So I did, and convinced my dad to do that. We took over the studio, and really I quickly found out that, some of the struggles were, how do you get new students? I'm here. I've painted the outside doorway. I'm here every night. I've got a great looking jump kick. I'm really nice. Why aren't people walking in the door? Right? Not understanding, all of those things yet. So I had to learn how to, all the things. Well, if I make flyers, well, I'll make my own flyers. I'll copy them, and they'll be black and white as shit. There's no way I can do color. All the things, and a million mistakes on how to put together a class schedule, what levels were together, what I was teaching, why I was teaching it. I could bore everybody with all of those, but as martial artists, that what you grew up on is not always the way that you should, do the next generation. Sometimes a lot of it is, but there's always new, better ways. And in some way, times the old ways work, but finding that blend, finding that mesh, and understanding what old school methods, what new school things, what things does, what is Joey like? What would I like my students to learn? What would I like them to be, based on now that I can do this, in addition to all of these other components that I grew up on that I think are right. And then all the stuff I would learn from other people, go, oh, that's really cool. I've never done that. Or I didn't know we could do that in our classes. So I made a lot of those marketing mistakes of, not marketing, not knowing how to marketing to the wrong communities and people, not, trying to go cheap with the equipment, or not spend enough money, or even know what to spend on marketing, not asking people that, so I could list all of those mistakes. But in those first few years, I got lucky with the fact that my overhead was so low. I mean, it didn't cost $100 a month to run that studio, so when you look at it like that, I didn't have a lot to lose, but I didn't have a way, there wasn't a way up other than what I was going to learn myself. So I kept getting like the NAPMA magazines in the mail, because I had my Century account, and, they would, come through. So looking at the NAPMA magazines, I'm like, yeah, I know that person or whatever. And there's Chuck Norris, and there's people. I'm like, there's no way these guys don't have 500 students. Who has 300 students? Nobody has. But again, in Arkansas, the answer is no one. But in other places, and I mean, it was common, or if you were good, it was better, whatever, depending on the time. And I'm like, surely I keep reading this and reading things. And then there's a lot of stuff that Joey started connecting with as a person. Like I connected with talking about how to set up separate kids classes, or how to teach little ninjas, and, and how to be a better customer service person. All of those things that no one along the way had ever talked to me about in martial arts. I had a lot of really nice people. I had a lot of really good instructors from the time I started until I was, 17, 18, 19. But no one was genuinely a really good, great business person. They were all just good people, and one person who ended up being a big leader, head of a group, he was pretty good with business, actually, but he just didn't teach everyone else. He come out of the 70s he was a big ATA guy back then. And then also when they did the Nautilus, I don't know, a lot of my old school people remember ATA. Nautilus had a deal in the late 70s and early 80s. He was one of those people. So he came from that vein, but he wasn't really teaching everyone else how to do that, or how to do good business. So none of us really knew that were in that group. And I did. I just knew how to be nice to people, and my energy, and how I was going to, teach a class with dynamics and all the things. I was just being myself. And that I had kind of cut my teeth on, being an assistant instructor from the time I was 11, 12 years old at the studio up until then, being a little hotshot kid. So I just took that and thought that would be enough. And it was good, because everybody that came in the door, I got most of them to sign up. I mean, it was only $38 a month. I mean, I didn't realize that's no big deal, right? But it was like a bargain. But I wasn't having trouble signing people up, even though I could make jokes about that. I didn't know contracts and really what I was doing with that either. I figured it out, pretty quickly, or at least attempted to. But I learned along the way, how to do more events and how to market better, and started reading and believing in some of those things I was reading, because there was
Right.
enough of it. I thought, yeah, this is making a difference, and developing stripe systems and reward systems for students and attendance records and things like that I did not grow up on. None of the people really did that I grew up with. Although, again, they were doing other good stuff, treating me well and giving me opportunities. But those things I had to learn myself, really. It was self-taught through that, line. And then I got involved with NAPMA and opened my second studio in '97, 2 years after taking over that studio. So I opened another studio in Jonesboro, where I live, and I ran both. I had, a guy that I grew up with training. He came back, and he was, good, solid guy, dedicated, loyal. And he was with me all the way up to the last few years in my studio recently. I mean, we've been together our whole life, but he started teaching with me and helping me. And then I had another a black belt girl that I wound up dating for a few years right there in that period, that came from that other town where I opened my first studio. And she was great and good and tough. And I got really lucky as far as having those two people, come around me or come into my life or come back into my life at that time. Whatever that said about me, I mean, that's great. It happened. And then we just had a lot of people that stayed with us strong over the next 2 or 3, 4 years. So I trained a lot of black belts. I had a lot of young people that came up and became teenage black belts that stuck with me into being young adult black belt leaders and instructors and good competition people over the years. So as that grew on, our retention level was pretty good those first few years. And that was really what helped me stay afloat. And then once I opened the second studio and was trying to do that, and was trying to get into running a tournament circuit and starting the Arkansas Open, which was called the Arkansas Classic back then, as part of the state circuit, and trying to do that, get involved with that more. I had a lot of great people by that time around me, but man, I had no idea how to manage it.
Well, now you put all of this time, into learning the business and growing the schools and, expanding out. Let's flash forward, because we're gonna run out of time in a bit. But you decided to sell your school or close your school? Which one?
Well, I sold components of the studio. I didn't sell it outright, so they would continue to run. I thought about that. I had a couple of people kind of make offers to take it over and buy it out, and keep running it. But not that would have been a negative, because both of those people I spoke with, they come from great groups. They do a great job where they are, but neither one of them are from this area. They are from a substantial amount of, distance away. That's okay sometimes. And I think they would probably be okay, because I believe in who those people are, school owners, and, they do a good job. But with my people, a lot of my top people I already had people over the last few years that were moving away, opening studios. I have one in California now, different people in different places. And my 3 top people at that point in time were all in a position where they could move on and do other things. One of them wanted to keep doing martial arts. Now he's in Florida at the studio where I teach part-time. He's there full-time. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And I thought, if I were to do that, all of our existing customers, they really wouldn't have any of us around, during that transition, just because of the way that it would work out. And, for doing it for so long and having it all, I didn't want that experience for them. And I had a lot of great opportunities to let a lot of them go to other studios that were friends of mine or that I was friendly with, if I knew they would have a good experience there. And we didn't have our after school program anymore the last year. Which I'm really thankful for that at that time, because I was spending so much more time with PROMAC and doing more with that. So on a personal level, it was great not to have that responsibility the way that I had it set up. But then I sold a lot of the components and a lot of the equipment and some of the things, the contracts that were bundled in. So we did kind of a combo thing, and then just released a lot of the equipment and people. And it was it was one of those things. After 27 years, it was sad. I had my sad moment,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't leaving martial arts. And, I haven't left martial arts. And a lot of the people I still see quite often.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my instructors and people that I've kind of helped grow up that are still involved in like PROMAC or the tournament league. I see them all the time. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So as far as that goes, I didn't, it's different, but it's really at a good level for where I am now and what we're doing. And I didn't have to like just quit and, just go do something totally different, because
Right.
again, I didn't want to do something different. I just needed to step out of that. So it was sad, but it felt good. It felt like it was a good time to like kind of turn the page,
Right.
if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a turn the page.
Yeah. And now, did COVID have any effect on your
Yeah.
decision? Was there anything else that had an impact on what brought you this decision? Because I know that
Yeah.
that's got to be a really hard decision to make when you put 27 years of your life into this project, if you will, right? Because those
Yeah.
people that train in your school become like family, right? And
They
the
are.
people that you have work for you, people have been training with you for so long. But you still have, it sounds like you still have good relationships, you still have people around you. But again, the original question was, did COVID have an effect on you making this decision?
Yeah, it definitely did. It wasn't, it wasn't COVID's. It wasn't the reason. I don't want to use the word fault, because it wasn't
Mm.
really, it wasn't like that. But it definitely affected it. I mean, COVID affected my business altogether. I mean, for my position in particular, because everybody's different. Even though I was in business for so long and we had our highs and lows and whatever, because of the way a lot of things were set up behind the scenes, we didn't get a lot of, business COVID support, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
like government, that type of thing. So that's okay. But community wise, we got pretty good support.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, students, and we did a lot of the things, and we took a hit, but it wasn't like an ending, like, not gonna make it hit. We just kind of scratched through it. But coming out of that, my people were affected more than the studio was. Like my
Mm-hmm.
staff people, I had different staff people for different reasons that were either moving or got, things were displaced with their, I mean, so we got hit harder on that than I think anything. And that was more of like, yeah, if, I wanted to sell the studio or wanted to turn it over or wanted to like get a partner and just, do what I'm doing now, because I did have to personally pivot.
Mm-hmm.
If I would have had 2 or 3 of my people that were not as affected and were going to be steady there, then yeah, well, I could have done something like that with them. But that wasn't the case. So yeah, I mean, COVID definitely affected that, because it took away that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at it from that perspective, it did. But it definitely, it was something we got through, up through 21, and we're moving along. But it did affect the staff, so it definitely did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're almost at our time, and I definitely want to talk about the comic book.
Yeah.
That had to be a hobby of yours. Growing up as a kid, I'm sure. Growing up in the '80s, right?
Yeah.
All the comics, all the stuff. So are you there? You're there now, right? Are you in the comic
Yeah,
book shop?
I've got actually in my house, my side room here, I've got a lot of these things. Some of this stuff is personal behind me, but yeah, I've launched the Comic Ninja in 2020 during COVID, which is crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But we launched it then, and so now kind of redoing everything on the line right now with all of the with all the moving and me, traveling so much, being online and being able to facilitate is exciting. There's so much out there. So over the last 18 months or so, I've been, stashing, building, maneuvering, doing little things on the side and keeping active online with the Comic Ninja community. But it's an extension of my personal love of it all, just like I love martial arts. But to be able to be in the collectible business and help people get stuff that they love, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like teaching somebody to get good at martial arts and letting them fall in love with that. To me, it's all positive,
Mm-hmm. Well, I grew up a huge Star Wars fan, right? Like
Nice.
when I was a kid, I had every Star Wars, toy that was ever made. And, you know, I look back and, you know, if I would have saved most of that stuff in in the case, but nobody thought about that back then. Christmas time comes, you get all the figures and you're ripping them open and you're playing with them, right?
It's like the Batmobile in the box. You don't
Right.
want to leave it in the box back there. You want to open it. You want to play with it. You want Batman. You know, you want. I'm just going to leave it in the box when you're 8 years old. You know.
No.
But they are more valuable that way. But you know, if you've seen the 40-year-old virgin, there's a great scene in that with that. That's an entirely different thing.
Yeah. Well, as an adult, I kind of, you know, when the newer Star Wars movies started coming out, I went back and I started collecting, you know, because as a kid, I wasn't collecting. My parents would give me gifts and, you know, play with the toys. But as an adult, like now I'm collecting, and I probably still have a pretty substantial collection of like the 12-inch Star Wars. You know, most people would call them dolls. I don't collect dolls, but action figures. Exactly. Right. And, you know, it's just kind of cool because, you know, Star Wars was just such a huge part and still is. I'm like such a Star Wars nerd still with books.
It's a multi-generational thing, and I don't know that it'll ever quite go away. You know, my kids kind of like it as well. They've grown up on everything. We've seen every MCU movie. They're skipping Star Wars. They go up that. So by the time Avengers came out, they were in the theater with me, and they hit every like it's the thing. So I mean, stuff like Star Wars, and if you make them positive and you share it with your family, it's just another thing, but it could be a really, really cool thing that will go into your grandchildren and their friends. And it's a great way to connect with the youth. And now, I mean, who doesn't love, everybody loves something. Yeah. Everybody loves something.
Right. Sure. Cool. Well, that's awesome that you've got this, you know, you've got all these different passions of yours that you're able to still, you know, continue to do with martial arts. You got PROMAC, you got the comics and whatnot. But, we're at the end of our time, and that time went super fast, like it always does. Man. Yeah. But I appreciate you being on with me here today and just kind of sharing some of the stories and catching up a little bit. I want to wish you all the best in the future and hope to stay connected. And
yeah, brother, I appreciate it. You're doing a great job on the show. Appreciate you talking with everybody, let everybody share their experience, and I hope that maybe I'm motivated or let somebody know that there's a whole lot of failure in order to keep moving, you know, forward towards success, you know, and that's it. But if I can ever help anyone, reach out to me, let me know. You can always check us out at promackarate.com for any of the tournaments, or the comicninja.com if you guys want to hit me up with any of that stuff. So if I can ever help anyone, please let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, thanks for being on the show. It's been a blast being able to, you know, just have these you know, different martial arts school owners, legends, you know, authors, speakers, comedians, the whole bit. I think that everybody has a story, and everybody's story could impact somebody else. We can all take lessons from each other. So I hope that everybody watching here today really enjoyed hearing Joey's story. And who knows, maybe we'll have you come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the comics another time.
You can, man. Competition days, comics, whatever you want, brother. I appreciate you. Anytime.
All right. Yes, sir. All right, guys. Well, listen, that's it for today. Look forward to having Samuel Diaz coming up tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So we got some great competitors coming on, some great coaches coming up, and just can't wait to see what's next. So, guys, go out and make it a great day, and we will see you on the next show of Master Motivation. Thanks, Joey.
All right. Bye, guys.